Well, thanks very much, and welcome to the inner west of Sydney, and welcome to Greenlow. And at its heart here is Addi Road Community Centre. They help here some 8,000 people every week. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years that's really changed is it used to be people who are homeless, people who are unemployed. Now they're helping out the working poor as well. Mums and dads who can't afford to feed their kids, who can't afford to get by with the cost of living. People in this community from outside will say, oh, the inner west, it's gentrified. Yeah, it is. There are people moving in here who are professional, but it also has more boarding house residents than any electorate in Australia. It also has a whole lot of people who are doing it so tough. But here at Addi Road, together with the other organisations who are here, like Youth Off the Streets, Ethnic Community Childcare, they help people out each and every day. People come and they volunteer. They volunteered in big numbers during the COVID pandemic, making a real difference to people's lives. The Prime Minister seems to think that people have got it easy right now. He's out of touch with how tough people are doing it right now. What we need isn't just cost of living relief during an election campaign that disappears once people have cast their vote. What we actually need is strategies and plans to make sure that no one is left behind. Something I've spoken about consistently during this election campaign. No one left behind and no one held back. That is Labor's approach. That is where we will go.
Mr. Albanese, these organisations are run largely by kind-hearted community members, philanthropists, and others, and a whole collection of funding. And politicians love to come here and be photographed, but they don't leave any money behind. This place gets $0 in recurrent funding from any level of government to operate. Would you commit to funding organisations like this in some recurrent fashion so they continue to do this work?
Well, it certainly has merit. And one of the things that this community centre has benefited from is some of the community grants that have come through my electorate are here. This is the site of where the whalers trained during World War I before they left for the First World War. It's an old defence site, and indeed a great legacy of the Whitlam government was to purchase this. This was up for development, and it was purchased for community use. It's been run through many organisations, reverse garbage, there's a whole range. There's a Greek theatre across the road there. It provides an incredible community service. I think it is an example when we speak about where grants go from government. There's a real case towards going for organisations like this are deserving. It's not about a colour-coded map in a minister's office. These people do incredible work and they're worthy of support.
On Q&A last night, you said you put downward pressure on inflation through targeted spending, but all the signature policies that you've mentioned take time to implement. So what will you do to curtail rampant inflation by the end of the year?
Well, we have a plan to make sure that all of our expenditures, our big commitments that we're making are ones that will grow the economy. That's why in particular we've singled out childcare as the #1 priority. That's in consultation with what the business community is saying, that it will grow workforce participation, grow productivity, produce a return as well. So we've prioritised those investments, but we've also said in terms of expenditure and putting downward pressure on, that we'll have a review of government expenditure by Treasury and Finance. We'll go through line by line where we can make a difference, and we'll do that. We will do that before the end of the year is what we've committed to.
Mr. Albanese, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has said that a hung parliament wouldn't necessarily cause the instability that both parties are wanting. You pulled out making a deal with so-called deal independence, and you're honestly saying that in the event of hung parliament, you wouldn't negotiate with them. How realistic is that?
Well, I do note Malcolm Turnbull's article or speech that he's giving this morning. and I also heard him on ABC radio this morning. He spoke about the fact that so many people who are traditional Liberals feel the modern Liberal Party under Scott Morrison doesn't represent them, and they're walking away from the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party are divided. They're a rabble. They're led by a man who a whole lot of his own front bench don't want him anywhere near their seat and don't want to appear with him in public. And that stands in stark contrast to Labor. Labor which is united, Labor which is ready to form a united, cohesive government, Labor that has a clear plan for a better future. The Liberals are a mess. That's the truth of the matter.
Just on cost of living again, I asked you this a couple of days ago. This is about the job seeker rate and the pension rate. The cost of living crisis is getting worse, and you said it yourself, those most impacted are the unemployed. Why won't you commit to raising the job seeker rate if you become Prime Minister?
I gave this answer the other day, and it's the same answer today.
But you never committed to it.
That's right. What we have said is that we will consider what we can do in each and every budget. That's what Labor governments do. When we had our last term in government, we had the largest ever increase in pensions in Australian history. The largest ever increase in pensions. Hello, what's your name?
Sally.
What?
Sally.
Hello, how you going? Where's your mum or dad? That's your mummy. Hi, mummy. Thanks very much for that contribution. Yeah. Sure. Oh. Well, you can have one.
The pace of your campaign is starkly different from Scott Morrison. He's racing between different electorates. It's a slower pace for you. I just wanted to ask, how are you feeling post-COVID? Are you still going to need to rest into polling day? But also on that Parliament question, the Teal independents, including Monique Bryan, suggest there needs to be changes on border policies, that you need to end offshore detention, but also increase the refugee intake. Will you horse trade on border protection?
No, we won't. And in terms of my health, look, it's still. I think you've had COVID. It has an impact, doesn't it?
Haven't needed to have enough in the afternoon. You're running to be Prime
It
Minister.
doesn't. It doesn't.
So that, are you match fit?
It has an impact. Well, I'll tell you what I did yesterday. I got up in the morning. I did breakfast TV. I did radio into Victoria. I went into a smart energy expo in at the convention centre. I talked to providers there. I then did a press conference. I then went down and had a meeting with the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I then went up to the CPO, Commonwealth Parliamentary Offices, and had more meetings. I then went and spoke at a lunch at the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and gave a considered, extensive economic speech about a better future and about productivity. I then went into my electorate office in Marrickville, and then I did Q&A last night. I think that's a pretty. I think that's a pretty heavy program. Well, the Prime Minister is trying to put out there that seats like McEwen are marginal seats. The truth is that Rob Mitchell will win with a considerable margin in McEwen. And today I'm doing this event. I'm then doing some other work that needs to be done, and then I'll be in Parramatta later on. I look forward to seeing you in Parramatta. And you flicked off, and then I'll come back. No, I'm in charge. You.
Why has Labor committed to ending live sheep exports, and will you put a timeline as to when that end will take place?
No, we won't, and we haven't in our policy. Our policy has changed. The amount of live exports has halved in recent times, and will continue the summer ban, but we'll consult with state governments, in particular the Western Australian state government, but we'll also consult with the agricultural sector about the issues around live sheep export. Yeah.
In week one of the campaign, after you did not know the Reserve Bank's cash interest rate, you did not know Australia's unemployment rate, you said you're human, you make mistakes and you mess up. Last night, on the question,
Q&A on the ABC, you said that you were not given the opportunity to name the 6 points on your National Disability Insurance Scheme policy. Did you make the mistake and not forget, or were you not given the opportunity to respond? If so, will you fess up to making a mistake today? And is asking a question about your own policy?
Hang on, order. You get the question, then I'll have the answer.
And he's asking a question about one of your own policies that you announced that really address the question.
No. Well, let me tell you about what the NDIS is about. It is about, we have a signature policy, which is what I said yesterday. A signature policy to put people at the centre of the NDIS. That's why we created the NDIS, and that's why Labor will always defend the NDIS. Now, there are a range of things that we'll do to that end. Stopping the cuts, stopping the waste, making it more efficient, making sure that people in regions can be looked after, but also lifting the cap on NDIA staff so that people can get those people-to-people relations. But we'll also then, that all combines to putting people at the centre of the NDIS. And one of the ways that we will do, which is what I said yesterday, one of the ways that we will do that is by making sure that people with disabilities are on the NDIS board, making sure that we double funding for the advocacy groups, which are there as well. And let me tell you what the NDIS is about. It's not about gotcha questions. What it's about is providing hang on, you had your opportunity. You had your opportunity, and now it's my turn to answer. So just wait. What leadership is about is determining when there is a problem, identifying it, and then coming up with solutions. We did that in government. We created the NDIS. We're doing that from opposition under Bill Shorten, who's had a role both in government and in opposition, and he is coming up with solutions to stop the cuts and to put people back at the centre of the NDIS, right at the centre of the NDIS. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it is personal for me. Because where I grew up, not far from here, and we'll put in a bit of an appearance in a week there. I grew up with a mum who was not diagnosed properly with rheumatoid arthritis. It's a 2-storey house. You've probably seen it on Channel 9 with Carl. We did an interview there. My mum, because she wasn't diagnosed and didn't get the assistance that she needed for her health, couldn't at one stage. It's a 2-storey place. The bedrooms were upstairs. She had to come down the steps every day, every morning, on a bum because she couldn't walk down the steps. She couldn't get the sort of support that she needed to use a knife and a fork to cut up food because her hands were crippled up. As her health deteriorated, she couldn't get it. I remember the battles to try and get bars so that she get it. It was an old council house that had the old bars systems and the old gas hot water. She couldn't get bars to get in and out of a shower. Those simple things that the NDIS provide to improve people's lives. That is what the NDIS is about. That is what a government that I lead will be about, providing real help for real people, and I've answered the question. My own colleagues are part of a cohesive, strong, united, experienced team that have a plan for a better future for this country. And one of the things that this debate is about, this election is about, I'll tell you what it is about. It is about serious plans on serious issues. Because what we have in this country is a cost of living crisis. We have a gender pay gap, which is there. We have too many people who are being left behind. We have people who can't get access to a better future through opportunity of education. We have women who can't afford to work 5 days a week because the costs of childcare are too much. That's holding them back. It's also holding back the businesses that they work for. We have real issues in this country. Labor has real plans to fix them. You.
On the question at yesterday's press conference, do you think it was unfair to hound you on specific bullet points of the NDIS policy? Do you think that line of questioning was unfair? And if so, how are you going to stand up to Xi Jinping if you can't stand up to us?
Look, people are entitled to ask questions.
Just on the economy, leading economists are warning that neither you nor Mr Morrison have a plan to address Australia's structural deficit, and the spending forecasts have ramped up markedly over the last 3 years. Can you give a guarantee that Labor would not make any cuts to health, education or the NDIS?
Labor will always be better on health, education and the NDIS.
That's not a guarantee that you won't cut it though, Mr Albanese.
Labor governments will always be better on health, education and the NDIS. We have programs that have put in, committed to additional funding in health, education and the NDIS, and we will stand by that additional funding. Serious, this is an example of what puts people off politics. You cannot have a clearer answer than that Labor is putting additional funding into health, education and the NDIS, and we stand by it. And you know what puts people off politics? That sort of word game. That is very clear. It can't be clearer. We stand by our additional funding. That's not a cut, that's more funding.
Mr. Albanese, last June, Stephen Jones said paying super on parental leave was a job that has to be done. In April, he even called on the Morrison government to do it, saying it was Labor policy. Why have you backflipped? Can you please explain why?
We've just had questions about the economy and about costs and about fiscal policy. We're being very measured. Would this be a good thing to do? Yes, it would be. It is something that we'll examine in government, but in a range of areas. What we're doing is being responsible. What we're not doing is saying one thing, to go to the last question as well. What we're not doing is saying one thing before the election and something else afterwards. So that we have to say...
The election. You were saying it was your policies recently.
No. Our policies are when I have announced them or when they've been announced during this election campaign. Yeah. Just a couple more.
Sorry, just back to the pandemic for a second and learning the lessons
Sure.
from the pandemic. A parliamentary inquiry that's chaired by your Labor frontbencher, Katie Gallagher, recommended there be a royal commission into the pandemic. That isn't yet Labor policy. But what is your personal position on that? If Labor was to support the royal commission, how important is it that it's done relatively quickly when the lessons are still fresh in our minds?
Look, it's very important. This was a recommendation by the committee that Katie Gallagher chaired and that Katie Gallagher did a great job on, it must be said, and other members participated. I cannot envisage a situation in which whoever wins government wouldn't want to examine the once-in-a-century pandemic and the response. You have to do so. We have to examine it so that we learn the lessons, not as a political exercise, although some of it undoubtedly would be political. You would want to understand how it is that, even though the government was being warned that some companies were getting JobKeeper who were increasing their profits, they chose not to change any of that, and we saw tens of billions of dollars go to companies that were increasing their profits. At the same time, as we've seen here today, volunteers are coming down and packing food, some of which is, to give credit where credit's due, some of this food comes from local businesses as well. There's an arrangement to give a free ad here with Coles at Marrickville Metro, for example. So I agree. It's a serious question. I'm addressing it seriously. What I'm saying is that we will examine it, but I support looking at it through a measure like a Royal Commission. We haven't finalised what the structure would be. We're still in the pandemic. So I think, I found that out in the last weeks. I've had COVID, and on the day, one of the days that I was in isolation, 50 people died. This is still having an impact, this pandemic. This is real, the impact that it's having. We need to examine it. We need to make sure that we learn the lessons which are there, because this is a once-in-a-century impact. And I think the pandemic also has shown, I mean, some of it's fed into our policy development. It has shown the strength of Australian society, the sacrifices that people have made, the volunteers down here. Addi Road have, I'm not sure how many staff they've got down here, not enough. By and large, they're just volleys. You know, people like Craig Foster has brought in incredible people. The Afghanistan refugees, those young women who were helping out today, by the way, I met them last year when I was down here. I volunteer here without cameras, by the way, just so you know. So in terms of those Afghani teenagers, young women, I mean, they are heroes. You know, they escaped Kabul. They're right, there they are. You are heroes, and you will make great Australians, great Australians. And here you are, you haven't been in the country for a year, and you're here helping people, You know, one of the things that strikes me, and it is something that, a value that I have from the people I grew up with, the most generous people in this country I have found are those who have less, and this is an incredible example of that, and I thank you for what you're doing here. I am glad you're safe here in Australia. Die or die trying. It's a remarkable story how they got out of Afghanistan, by the way, a remarkable story of courage and resilience, and that is why we have supported the Australian government increasing the number of refugees from Afghanistan. We need to do our bit. Just last one.
There's been moments during this press conference where you clearly got agitated. Why are you not able to answer our questions? We would be able, like, if you were making coming announcements, for instance, we would have a lot more questions. The focus is now becoming about you and your funders. When will you make a funding announcement?
I've made announcements on regular basis during this campaign, and I'll continue. I'll continue. I'll continue to do so. I'll continue to make policy announcements. So yesterday, I gave a 30-minute speech. I haven't got a question about it here this morning. A 30-minute speech to the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in the presence of 130 business leaders. They could have fitted 300, they tell me, if they had enough room, in front of former Prime Minister Paul Keating. It was a serious speech about economic productivity, about the way forward, about women's economic participation. I haven't got a question here today about it, but I look forward to you reading the speech and maybe ask me a question tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Authorised by P. Erickson, ALP, Canberra.